Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? I feel good. I feel optimistic. I feel encouraged. Things have been going well for the last couple of weeks and months in the creative space for me. I've been very productive, and I'm on track to finish a manuscript that I've been working on by the end of this month. I got like 3 more chapters to write, and the last couple of times that I've sat down to hammer stuff out, it's gone very well. Over the weekend, I wrote an article for Upstream Reviews. It was kind of a recap of an X space, so we're just shoving this all through the human centipede of news and stuff in writing. But the big piece that broke was last week a new publisher announced its creation into the world, Ark Press. And there are operations like this that pop up with some regularity, but this one's got a little bit more weight and clout behind it. At least from my perspective, because I'm familiar with a lot of the names that are behind it. So DJ Butler, you've heard me talk about him before. I've actually been reading his Witchy Eye book over the last couple of weeks. I slated it for one of my slow chapter by chapter analyses, the way that I did Silmarillion last year. And I'm about 5 chapters into it. I'm picking at it here and there. It's a book that, by Dave's own admission, he's like, pretty much everybody else that read it was also writers. And I was like, that's a good way of summing it up. Like, from when this book first came out in 2017 and I read it, I was like, man, this thing is dense. Like, it's cool, and there's a lot of great stuff going on in it, but it is dense. Like, you wouldn't just pick it up and read it like you would a thriller or any other fantasy. And because it's technically historical fantasy, it's tied to a lot of external stuff that you've got to have some knowledge of in order to appreciate the context that he's presenting. And so I wanted to do breakdown videos that would make this book more accessible, just so that Dave could reach a wider reader base with it, because it is I'm going to talk about it forever. We're not talking about Witchy Eye here. The point is, it's a great book. Dave is a really great writer and a fascinating mind. I've introduced you guys to some works of his before here on the channel. And he's been an acquisitions editor with Baen Books for the last couple of years. They do sci-fi and fantasy. So the fact that he's going to be spearheading this new operation and that they've got backers behind them and investors and stuff, I'm really high on this as a new publishing venue. So the first 2 authors that they announced that they've got, and it looks like they want to do 12 books in their first year. I don't know if that means 12 this year, or if they're acquiring and the 12 that they're acquiring this year are going to come out next year. Still waiting for specificity on that. But the 2 big name authors that they acquired up front are Larry Correia and Travis Corcoran. Now, if you're watching my channel, chances are you know who Larry Correia is. He's one of the heaviest hitters in slightly off mainstream sci-fi and fantasy, we'll say. He was a New York Times bestseller until the New York Times found out who he was and then put their thumb on the scale so that they'll never mention his name again, because he's a big evil baddie man who does wrong things like advocates against debt and owns guns, but I digress. He's a fantastic entertainment talent, and I've read most of what he's published, and I'm very, very high on his work. Travis Corcoran might be a lesser-known entity to you. I will tell you right up front that if you're on X, if you're on Twitter, he is a bit of an acquired taste right there. There's a kind of a hump to get over, because he's a very strong personality. Without any hyperbole, you can describe him as an Ivy League educated engineer, autistic libertarian from New Hampshire. This guy is incredibly smart, very opinionated, and he's not afraid to call out BS wherever he sees it. And he's not a guy that like when he talks, he knows what he's talking about, and I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about him the most. I read his book, The Powers of the Earth, a while ago, and I found it off-putting at the time, just because it's one of those books where you can tell that the author's having an argument with himself against the backdrop of a dystopian sci-fi where there's a bit of an Atlas Shrugged situation, but instead of Galt's Gulch, all the producers go up to the moon, and then the Earth government sends its army to steal everything that the producers are making on the moon. It's not subtle, but it is. It's also. It's hard to describe. I'll do a separate video about that one later. The point is, Travis is very intelligent, and he sees ahead of curves on a lot of things that I, as a vanilla middle of the road sci-fi reader, didn't see at the time. This was pre-COVID and everything, and then COVID happened, and a lot of the government's abuses became a lot more naked. And I was like, oh, this is the kind of stuff Travis was talking about in his book. Hot damn! These are very accomplished entertainers in the sci-fi space that also happen to know what they're talking about when they're talking about it. And so the fact that they were able to get these guys that are not just opinionated but also accomplished, like, I like that. But more to the point, especially Larry, like, he entertains first. He just does so from a position of like what he's really, really passionate about. And if that's the kind of talent that Ark is looking to hire, then people that can be broadly entertaining but also know what they're talking about is like awesome. Like, I want to know more about what they're going to pick up and where they're going from there. So Dave Butler hosted a space on X. It lasted about an hour. He gave the rundown of what Ark Press is all about. That's the article that I wrote for Upstream, just putting the bullet points down in case you didn't want to take an hour to listen to all of it. He said, like, this is what we're looking for in terms of word length, what we're looking to publish. We want upbeat stuff, positive stuff. We're not looking for grimdark. We're not looking for intersectionality. We're not looking for politics. Sci-fi has gotten too political. And you might say, well, Graham, you just described Travis Corcoran and Larry Correia. It's like, yeah, those are two guys that are political, but their work is decidedly less so. It's entertaining, rip-roaring sci-fi. That one book that Travis put out was heavy on engineering and science and stuff. It was just also set in a economic dystopia that was caused by political interventions and whatnot. So you'll get a little bit more of that with Travis, but on the sci-fi side, like, this is a dude who knows what he's talking about. I've said that a whole bunch of times. I really want to drive that point home. Like, he's a dude that I appreciate his insights and his elaborations on things. He'll randomly go off on a 34 tweet tangent about the engineering of the spaceship in Interstellar and things that he notices and stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to automatically assume that he's right or wrong, but when I read his stuff, I can learn a new side to an argument that I didn't even know existed. Me just being a college dropout trucker who reads a lot. Like, he's a guy that I can learn from. And I can also be entertained by him at the same time. I put together a proposal for Ark Press after listening to that X Space, just because I thought, like, these are the kinds of people that have, like, they've got the ethos that I would want to work with. And so I wrote up a proposal. That's what they call, like, their pitches. It needs to be a couple thousand words. Here's what we're looking for. Here's what the parameters need to be. Tell us all about your story. And it can be for a book that isn't written yet. But if you send us the proposal and it's the kind of thing we're interested in, we'll say, go ahead and write it. It's like, okay, well, I was already planning on writing Answerable Courage, the Thanksgiving book. And so I wrote up a detailed proposal for that on Friday night and sent it in. And I assume it'll take some time to hear back and see whether Ark is interested in that. If they do take it, it would be a longer version than I was planning to write for my self-publication purposes, only because even though, like, there's not a whole lot of budget threshold to cross when I'm self-publishing, there are other considerations like time. And so if I were writing it for a publisher, I would be able to do a deeper treatment than if I was just writing it for my own economical reasons and having to keep it a little bit shorter so the price of entry is a little bit lower and people can read something a little bit lighter from this guy who's still not quite established as an author with a reader base, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, like I said, I want to get that book out this year. If a publisher says that they want it, but it's not going to come out until next year, I'm fine with that, because a publisher getting it and having a marketing engine behind them will get the book in front of more eyes than I ever could on my own. So in summary, a new publisher popped up, and I know some of the people that work with them, and I'm not saying that in the sense that, like, I should have an in. It's that I have confidence that they are the kind of people I would want to work with, and that I could trust to be good stewards of what I do. He did say also that they're looking for Westerns, and he jokingly asked on the space, because I joined in as a speaker. He's like, hey, you're in Oklahoma City. Are you going to be our Western writer? And I was like, Western is a is a specific discipline, but it's not to say that I couldn't do it. Ultimately, if I end up going the route of Louis L'Amour, where he became known as the Western guy, but he wrote a lot of other things, and Westerns just paid the bills so that he could write other things, well, I could do a lot worse than emulate Louis L'Amour, right? So that's it for this one. I'm excited, and the writing has been going well, and there's a new publisher popping up that aligns with my own ethos creatively and professionally. And so I like that. I like that there are more opportunities and that there are people with resources throwing it behind publishing endeavors, saying, if there are people creating this and there are people wanting to read it, we'll fund it, we'll get involved, and we'll go from there. Things are good. Things are hard, but things are good. And we like that. That's how life should be. Anyway, I'm going to sum it up there. It is now just about time for midnight ride action, so I'll probably publish this one on the main channel, though. Y'all drive safe. See you out there.